Forest mysteries. The sandbar had always been there. Derek knew it from a dozen summers, a crescent of pale grit and hardy grass that the river seemed to respect. The old men in the village called it a summer island, something the water uncovered when it was feeling generous. They said it had never been taken by the flood, not even in the spring when the ice broke and the river turned mean. Now, standing in the dusk, Derek watched the water lick at the edge of their campfire and felt the old men's certainty crumble. "It's just a little rise," Johnny said, but his voice had lost its easy confidence. He stood with his hands on his hips, looking at the darkening water as if it had insulted him. "Happens all the time. Rain up in the hills." Edwin sat by the fire, hugging his knees. He was young, barely 20, and his face showed everything. Right now it showed fear. It wasn't this high an hour ago. "Look at the willow." Derek looked. The gnarled willow that marked the highest point of the island now had its roots in water. An hour ago they had sat beneath it, eating fried perch and drinking the last of Johnny's vodka. Now the fire was on the only dry patch left, and the boat. "Where did you tie it?" Derek asked. Johnny turned. "Same place as always. To that root." He pointed to a thick root that now lay submerged, a dark shape under the surface. "The rope's good. It'll hold." They walked to the edge. The water was clear enough to see the root, the frayed end of the rope drifting in the current like a dead snake. "No boat." "It snapped," Edwin whispered. "Or it wasn't tied right." Johnny shoved him. It wasn't hard, but Edwin stumbled on the wet sand. "You saying that's my fault? I tied it. You were the one messing with the oars." "Stop." Derek's voice cut through. He knelt by the water, feeling the cold seep into his boots. The rope end was ragged, not cut. He wanted to believe it had simply worn through, an accident of time and water. But the knot had been good. He'd checked it himself. He remembered the way Johnny had cursed at the oars, the way he'd yanked at the rope to free the boat from the shallows. It didn't matter now. The boat was gone, carried downstream, or already lodged in some brush pile a mile away. What mattered was the water, still rising, now covering the path they'd used to reach the high ground. "We need to get everything to the willow," Derek said. "The firewood, the packs, everything." They moved fast, the urgency making them silent. Derek grabbed the remains of the fish, the blanket, the metal pot. Johnny hauled the heavier log they'd been using as a bench. Edwin gathered the loose sticks from the fire, throwing them onto the growing pile beneath the willow. The water followed them. By the time they had everything under the tree, the fire was gone, drowned in a hiss of steam. The island had become a muddy oval no bigger than a village house, and the river was still climbing. "It's never done this," Edwin said. His voice was high, shaking. "You said it never floods." Derek didn't answer. He was watching the water creep toward a dark shape on the far side of the willow. At first he thought it was a log, something the river had pushed up, but logs don't move. The shape lifted its head. Yellow eyes caught the last light. Edwin saw it too. He let out a sound, something between a gasp and a whimper. A wolf. It was young, thin, its ribs showing through a dirty gray coat. It had crawled onto the highest edge of the island, maybe 100 feet from them. Its legs were splayed, its sides heaving. It had swum, and it was as trapped as they were. Johnny's hand closed around a heavy piece of driftwood. "I'll take care of it." "No," Derek stepped in front of him. "Look at it. It's exhausted. It's not coming near us." "It will when it gets hungry." "It's already hungry. Look at it." The wolf stared at them. Its ears were flat, its tail tucked. It was not a predator now. It was a prisoner, the same as them, waiting for the water to decide. Johnny lowered the wood but didn't drop it. "So what? We just sit here with it." "We sit here," Derek said. "We keep the fire going. We wait." Edwin was already pulling the damp wood together, trying to coax a flame from the last embers. His hands shook so badly he dropped the matches twice. Derek knelt beside him, struck a match, held it steady. The fire caught, small and fragile, casting a circle of light that barely reached the wolf. The water kept rising. By the time the fire was properly burning, the island had shrunk to the size of a small room. The willow stood at the center, its branches casting twisted shadows. Derek sat with his back to the trunk, watching the wolf. It watched back. It did not move, did not growl. It simply lay there, its yellow eyes reflecting the firelight, patient and still. Derek realized with a cold certainty that they were not the ones deciding what happened tonight. The water would decide. And if the water forced them closer, if the island shrank to nothing. He looked at the wolf, and the wolf looked at him. Two packs of teeth, one wrapped in wet wool, the other in wet fur, both waiting to see who would be the first to move. The fire popped. The water lapped at the mud. Derek did not look away. The night stretched like a wire pulled tight. Derek sat with his back against the willow, watching the water and watching the wolf. The fire was small now, a fist of orange light that made the shadows jump. Edwin fed it with twigs and bits of bark, anything dry enough to burn. Johnny stood at the edge of the light, the driftwood club still in his hand, his eyes fixed on the dark shape beyond. The water had not stopped rising. It came without sound, a slow black sheet that swallowed the mud inch by inch. Where they had stood an hour ago was now river. The island had become a hump of dirt no bigger than a room, and the willow stood at its center like a mast on a sinking ship. "We're going to lose the fire," Edwin said. His voice was tight, too high. The wood's almost gone. Derek looked at the pile. A few branches, the torn half of their blanket, the empty fish bones. It would last maybe another hour. Then they would have nothing but the dark and the cold. "We don't need the fire," Johnny said. "We need to get rid of that thing." He pointed the club at the wolf. "It's waiting for us to sleep. You know that." The wolf had not moved in a long time. It lay on its belly, its paws tucked under it, its head low. But its eyes were open, two coins of gold that followed every movement. Derek had seen dogs do the same thing, waiting for a scrap, waiting for a hand to move. But this was not a dog. "It's not coming near us," Derek said. "You don't know that. I know it's more scared of us than we are of it." Johnny laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Look at it. It's a wolf. It's not scared of anything. It's waiting." The water lapped at the roots of the willow. Derek felt a cold thread of fear run down his spine. Johnny was not wrong. The wolf was waiting, but so were they. The question was what they were all waiting for. Edwin sat closer to the fire, pulling his jacket tight. "My grandfather told me about wolves. He said they can swim for miles. It got here somehow. It can leave." "It's not leaving," Johnny said. "It's trapped, same as us. And when the water pushes it here, what then? You want to pet it." Derek watched the wolf. He tried to see it the way Johnny saw it. A threat, a mouth full of teeth, a thing that would tear their throats out given the chance. But all he saw was a ribbed flank rising and falling, a young animal that had made a bad choice and could not take it back. He thought of the old men in the village, the way they talked about the taiga. "The wolf is not your enemy," they said. "The wolf is your reflection. When you see it, you see what you are when no one is watching." The water touched the edge of the fire. It hissed, a sound like something breathing. Edwin scrambled to pull the burning sticks higher, pushing them onto a mound of mud that was already damp. The fire shrank, a handful of orange trembling in the dark. "That's it," Johnny said. He hefted the club and took a step toward the wolf. Derek was on his feet before he knew it. His hand closed around Johnny's wrist, hard enough to stop him. "No. Let go. You go near it, it'll fight. It's got claws, it's got teeth. You think you can kill it without getting bit? And then what? You bleed out here in the mud." Johnny's face was close, his breath sour with vodka and fear. "Better than letting it take us one by one." "It's not going to take anyone. Look at it." They both looked. The wolf had lifted its head. Its ears were forward, its body tense. It was watching Johnny, watching the club, and a low sound came from its throat. Not quite a growl, not quite a whine. It was a warning. Derek tightened his grip. You go any closer, it'll attack. You'll get hurt. Then we'll have to deal with you in it. Is that what you want? Johnny stared at him. For a long moment Derek thought he would swing anyway, that the fear had already made up his mind. But then Johnny's arm went slack. He let the club fall to the mud with a wet thump. Fine, he said, but when it comes for us, don't ask me to save you. He walked back to the fire, sat down heavily, and did not look at the wolf again. Derek stood in the dark, his heart hammering. He looked at the water. It had stopped rising. He could see it now, a dark line against the trunk of the willow, still and flat. The flood had reached its peak. He looked at the wolf. It had lowered its head again, its eyes half closed. It was not watching them anymore. It was resting, saving its strength. Derek sat down against the willow, his back to the trunk, his eyes on the water. The fire was almost gone. The cold was seeping through his clothes. But the water had stopped, and the island was still there, a patch of mud no bigger than a grave, holding them all above the dark. He did not sleep. He watched the wolf, and the wolf did not move, and the night wore on toward dawn. Dawn came slowly, a gray seep of light that turned the river to lead and the mud to bruised purple. Derek's eyes burned from watching, but he had not slept. Neither had the wolf. It lay in the same spot, its head now resting on its paws, its sides moving with shallow breaths. The water had not risen again, but it had not fallen either. The island was a smear of wet earth no bigger than a fishing boat, and the willow stood at its center like a flag on conquered ground. Edwin was the first to move. He crawled to the edge of the fire, now nothing but a black circle of ash, and poked at it with a stick. There was no heat left, no ember. The cold had settled into their bones overnight, and now the damp was worse, a wet chill that came up from the mud and down from the sky. Fire's gone, Edwin said. His voice was flat, empty of the fear from the night before. That was worse, Derek thought. Fear meant there was still something left to lose. Johnny sat with his back to the willow, his arms wrapped around his knees. He did not look at the wolf. He did not look at anything. His face was pale, his lips cracked. We need to eat. They had the remains of the fish from yesterday, a few pieces wrapped in the wet blanket. Derek counted them in his head. 3 perch, half a pike, all of it cold and slimy now. Enough for one meal if they stretched it. Then nothing. We split it, Derek said. Later, when we need it. Johnny shook his head. We need it now? We need strength if we're going to swim. Swim where? Edwin looked at the water, then at the far shore, a dark line of trees half a mile away. The current's still strong. We'd never make it. So we just sit here and wait to starve? The wolf lifted its head. The movement was slow, deliberate. Derek watched its ears swivel, catching the sound of their voices. Its eyes were yellow in the gray light, clear and bright. It did not look like an animal that was starving, but Derek could see its ribs, the sharp ridge of its spine. It had not eaten in days, maybe longer. Edwin stared at the wolf. There was something in his face now, not fear, but something softer. It's hungry too. Good, Johnny said. Maybe it'll die first. That's not funny. Who's laughing? Derek stood up, his joints cracking. He walked to the edge of the island, the mud sucking at his boots. The water was still, the current invisible beneath the flat surface. He could see branches, bits of debris, things the river had swallowed and now held in its gray stomach. No boat, no help coming. He turned back to the others. We wait. The water will drop. It always does. When it drops enough, we can wade to the shore. It's shallow in places. We find a sandbar, a ridge, something. And the wolf? Edwin asked. Johnny laughed, a dry rasp. What about it? Edwin looked at Derek, not Johnny. It's been here all night. It hasn't tried anything. Maybe it's not. Not what? Johnny pushed himself up, his face twisting. Not dangerous. It's a wolf. It kills things. That's what it does. You want to wait until it gets hungry enough to go for us. It's already hungry, Edwin said. Look at it. It's starving, but it's not coming near us. Because it's waiting. Or because it knows we're not food. Johnny took a step toward Edwin, his hands balled into fists. Derek moved between them before he knew what he was doing, his hand flat against Johnny's chest. Enough, Derek said. Fighting each other is how we die. You want to be the one who explains that to the village? That we killed each other over nothing. Johnny stared at him, his breath coming hard. For a moment, Derek saw something in his eyes, something that was not anger, but fear, pure and naked. Then it was gone, and Johnny turned away, walking to the far edge of the island, as far from the wolf as he could get. Derek let out a breath. He looked at Edwin, who was still staring at the wolf. The young man's hands were shaking, but his face was calm. There was something in his expression that Derek recognized, something he had seen in old hunters, in men who had spent too long alone in the taiga. Not acceptance, but something harder, a kind of respect. My grandmother used to tell me stories, Edwin said quietly, about wolves. She said they were guides, that if you were lost, you could follow one and it would take you out of the forest. Johnny snorted from the edge of the island. Your grandmother was a fool. Edwin ignored him. He was looking at Derek, his eyes earnest. She said they only showed themselves when you were ready to listen, that they were a sign. A sign of what? I don't know, Edwin said, but it's still here. It could have tried to swim last night. The water was high enough, but it stayed. Why would it stay? Derek looked at the wolf. It had not moved from its spot, but its eyes were on them, tracking their movements with a patience that was almost human. He thought about the old men in the village, the things they said about the forest and the things that lived in it. The wolf is your reflection, they had said. When you see it, you see what you are. He did not know what that meant, but he knew the wolf was not leaving, and neither were they. They were all waiting for the same thing, waiting for the water to drop, waiting for a path to open. And when it did, they would all go the same way, toward the shore, toward dry land, toward whatever came next. Johnny had picked up a piece of the fish from the blanket, a small perch, and was holding it in his hand. His face was hard, his jaw set. Derek saw what he was going to do a moment before he did it. Johnny, don't. But Johnny had already thrown it. The fish arced through the air, a silver flash against the gray sky, and landed in the mud a few feet from the wolf. The wolf's head snapped toward it, its body tensing. Let's see how much of a guide it is, Johnny said. The wolf did not move. It stared at the fish, then at the men, then back at the fish. Its ears were flat, its tail tucked. It was waiting, weighing the risk against the hunger. Edwin made a sound, half a gasp, half a plea. Leave it alone. The wolf moved. It was fast, a blur of gray fur and yellow eyes. And then it had the fish in its jaws and was backing away, its head low, its body ready to flee. It ate in 3 quick bites, gulping the meat down without chewing. Johnny laughed, but there was no joy in it. There, now it's fed. Maybe it'll leave us alone. The wolf finished the fish and licked its jaws. It did not run. It did not attack. It lay back down in the same spot, its head on its paws, and watched them with its yellow eyes. Derek looked at Johnny, then at Edwin, then at the wolf. The fish was gone, the food was less, and nothing had changed except one thing. The wolf had taken what they gave it, and it had stayed. It was not leaving. It was waiting, just like them. The water had begun to drop. Derek could see it now, a line of wet mud where the water had been, a slow retreat that would take hours, maybe all day. They would wade to the shore when it was low enough, and the wolf would wade with them, or it would swim, or it would stay on the island until it dried, and then walk out alone. He did not know. But he knew one thing. They had fed it, and it had not left. That meant something. He just did not know what. The water dropped with the slowness of a wound healing. Derek watched it through the morning, a patient retreat that left behind a rim of wet mud and the scattered debris of the flood. Branches, leaves, the pale bodies of dead fish. The river gave back what it had taken piece by piece, as if it were changing its mind. By midday, a crescent of dry mud had appeared on the far side of the island, and by afternoon the willow's roots were visible again, thick and dark and dripping. The wolf had not moved from its spot. It lay on the highest ground it could find, a small hummock near the island's edge, and watched the water with the same fixed attention it had given the men the night before. It had eaten the fish Johnny threw, and now its eyes were brighter, its head higher. The hunger was still there, visible in the sharp lines of its ribs, but something else had replaced the exhaustion. Patience, or maybe it was hope. Derek could not tell the difference anymore. They had eaten the rest of the fish at noon, splitting the cold flesh 3 ways and chewing it slowly, making it last. Johnny had wanted to save some, but Derek overruled him. They needed strength now, not later. The shore was still a long way off, a dark line of trees half a mile across the flat brown water, and between them and it there was nothing but current and cold. "We could make a raft," Edwin said. He was sitting on a root of the willow, his legs pulled up under him. "There's wood here. Branches, the dead stuff the river left." "With what?" Johnny gestured at the island, bare except for the willow and the scattered debris. "We don't have rope. We don't have anything to tie it with." "The blanket," Edwin said. "We could tear it into strips." "It's wet. It would fall apart." Derek listened without joining in. He was watching the wolf. It had stood up a few minutes ago, its first real movement in hours, and now it was pacing the edge of the island, its nose to the ground, sniffing at the mud. It moved with a careful slowness, testing each step before committing, its eyes on the water. It was looking for something, a path. The old men in the village had told him about this. When the floods came, the animals knew before anyone else. They moved to high ground, waited out the water, and then they left. They always left, and they always knew when it was time. "The wolf," Derek said. Johnny looked at him. "What about it?" "Look at it." They watched. The wolf had stopped at the water's edge, its front paws in the mud, its head lifted. It was staring at the shore, at the dark line of trees, its ears forward, its whole body tense. It was not looking for food. It was looking at something else, something Derek could not see. "It's waiting," Edwin said. "For what?" Johnny asked. "For the water to drop enough. For a path." Derek thought about it. The wolf had swum here, probably from the shore, fighting the current until it found the island. It had waded through the night, through the hunger, through the fear. And now it was waiting again, watching the water, watching the shore. It knew something they did not. Or maybe it was just doing what animals did, following an instinct older than thought, older than fear. The water dropped another inch while they watched. A sandbar appeared 50 feet from the island, a pale ridge of mud and gravel that had been hidden all morning. The wolf saw it at the same time Derek did. Its head turned, its eyes fixed on the bar, and for a moment it stood perfectly still, as if it were calculating something in its head. Then it looked back at the men. Derek felt something cold run down his spine. It was not fear, not exactly. It was something stranger, something that did not have a name. The wolf was looking at them, not as prey, not as a threat, but as something else, something it was waiting for. "It wants us to follow," Edwin whispered. "It's a wolf," Johnny said. "It doesn't want anything from us. It's been here all night. It could have tried to swim this morning. It didn't. It waited. It waited because the water was too high." "It's still high," Edwin said. "But look at it. It's ready." The wolf turned back to the water. It took a step forward, then stopped, its paw hovering over the surface. Its head swung toward the men again, and this time Derek was certain. It was waiting for them, not because it needed them, not because it was afraid, because something in its animal brain had decided that they were part of its path, part of the way out. Derek thought about the stories Edwin had told, the grandmother's tales of wolves as guides. He had never believed them, not really. They were village stories, the kind old women told to children to make them behave. But standing on the island, watching the wolf watch the shore, he found that he did not know what to believe anymore. The wolf stepped into the water. It was shallow here, barely up to its knees, and it moved slowly, testing the bottom with each step. It was heading for the sandbar, for the ridge of mud that would take it closer to the shore. It did not look back. Edwin stood up. "We should go. Now." "We don't even know if it's deep," Johnny said. "It could drop off. We could get swept away." "It knows," Edwin said. "Look at it." The wolf had reached the sandbar. It stood there for a moment, shaking water from its legs, and then it turned. It looked at the island, at the three men standing under the willow, and it let out a sound. Not a growl, not a bark. Something between them, a short, sharp yelp that cut through the damp air like a signal. Derek understood then. It was not a guide. It was not a sign. It was just an animal, hungry and scared, doing what animals did to survive. But it had found a way, and it was showing them. Not because it cared, not because it wanted to help. Because they were there, because they had fed it, because somewhere in its wolf brain they had become part of its pack. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe it was just that they were all going the same way. He looked at Johnny, then at Edwin. "We go." "Now." Johnny's face was pale, his eyes wide. "Now? Before the water changes its mind." He stepped off the island, into the water, and felt the cold bite through his boots. The mud was soft under his feet, sucking at his soles, but it held. He took another step, and another, and the water rose to his knees, his thighs. The current pushed at him, a steady pressure that wanted to pull him sideways, but he leaned into it and kept moving. Behind him, he heard splashing, Edwin's high breathing, Johnny's cursing. They were following. The wolf was ahead of them on the sandbar, watching, waiting, and when Derek reached the bar, it turned and moved on, toward the next ridge of mud, toward the shore. They followed. They did not speak. There was nothing to say. The water was cold, the current was strong, and the shore was still far away. But the wolf was ahead of them, picking a path through the flood, and Derek followed it because it was moving and because staying on the island had stopped being a choice a long time ago. The water dropped as they walked, the sandbars rising out of the current like the backs of sleeping animals. The wolf led them from one to the next, never looking back, never stopping. Derek's legs were numb, his hands were shaking, but he kept moving. One step, then another. The shore was closer now, the trees taking shape, the dark line of the forest becoming branches, trunks, solid ground. The wolf reached the shore before them. It pulled itself onto the mud, shook water from its coat, and disappeared into the trees without looking back. Derek watched it go, and then he put his head down and kept walking, because the shore was there and the water was dropping, and he was not going to stop now. The shore was not solid. It was mud and roots and the torn remains of bushes, a tangle that the flood had chewed and spat back out. Derek pulled himself onto it with hands that had stopped feeling anything, his fingers white and curled like the legs of dead spiders. Behind him, he heard Edwin's wet coughing, Johnny's heavy breathing, the sounds of men who had given everything they had and were still not safe. The water was at their ankles now, then their knees, then gone. Derek crawled up the bank until he found a root thick enough to hold and wrapped his arms around it. He lay there for a long time, his face in the mud, his body shaking with cold and something else, something that felt like relief but tasted like fear. When he finally pushed himself up, the shore was empty. The wolf was gone. The trees stood at the edge of the floodplain like a wall, dark and wet and waiting. There was no path, no trail, nothing but the water behind them and the forest ahead. Edwin was sitting on a log, his arms wrapped around himself, his teeth chattering so hard his whole body shook. Johnny stood a few feet away, bent over with his hands on his knees, his head down. He was making a sound, a low moan that Derek did not know if he should acknowledge. "We need to move," Derek said. His voice came out rough, barely a whisper. He cleared his throat and tried again. "We can't stay here. It's too wet. We'll freeze." Johnny lifted his head. His face was gray, his lips blue. "Move where? There's nothing here. The village is miles away. We don't know where we are." "We're on the south side of the river," Derek said. "The village is east. If we follow the shore, we'll hit the old logging road. It cuts back toward the bridge." "If," Johnny said. "You don't know that. You don't know anything." Derek did not answer. He was looking at the trees, at the dark spaces between them, at the way the light filtered through the wet branches. Somewhere in there was the road, and somewhere beyond the road was the village, and somewhere beyond the village was a fire and dry clothes and food. But between here and there was a mile of flooded forest, and they had nothing left. Edwin stood up, slowly, his legs unsteady. "The wolf went that way." He pointed into the trees, toward a gap where the brush was thinner. "It knew the way. Maybe we should follow it." "Follow a wolf," Johnny said. "You're out of your mind. It got us off the island, didn't it?" "It didn't get us anywhere. We swam. We walked. The wolf just went the same direction." Edwin looked at Derek, his face pale, but his eyes clear. "You saw it. You saw it wait for us. It could have gone hours ago. It waited." Derek did not know what he had seen. He knew the wolf had led them across the sandbars, had picked a path through the current that a man would not have found. He knew it had stopped at the shore and looked back, once, before it disappeared. He did not know if that was waiting or just an animal pausing before it ran. But Edwin was right about one thing. The wolf had gone into the trees, and the trees were where they needed to go. "We follow the shore," Derek said. "We stay out of the forest as long as we can. The road is east. We'll find it." They walked. The shore was a strip of mud and gravel between the water and the trees, narrow in some places, wide in others, but always there. The sun had come out, thin and weak, but it gave some light, some warmth. Derek's boots were full of water, his clothes heavy with it, and every step was a struggle against the cold that had settled into his bones. Edwin walked behind him, quiet, his head down. Johnny brought up the rear, and Derek could hear him muttering to himself, the words lost but the tone angry. They had been walking for maybe half an hour when the shore ran out. A wall of fallen trees blocked the way, a tangle of trunks and branches that the flood had piled against a bend in the river. There was no way around it except through the forest. Derek stopped. He looked at the trees, the dark spaces between them, the water standing in pools at their roots. The forest was flooded here, the ground invisible beneath a foot of brown water. They would have to wade, and they would have to trust that the ground beneath was solid. "We go in," he said. "Stay together. If you feel something, shout." They waded into the trees. The water was cold, colder than the river had been, and it smelled of rot and wet earth. Branches reached out of the gloom, snagging their clothes, their hair, their skin. Derek led with his hands out, feeling for the ground ahead, for the solid places between the soft spots. Behind him, Edwin made small sounds of effort, and Johnny said nothing at all. They had been in the trees for maybe 10 minutes when Derek saw it. A patch of ground higher than the rest, a hummock of moss and roots that rose above the water. On it, sitting on its haunches, was the wolf. It was watching them, not with fear, not with aggression, but with something that looked like patience. Its ears were forward, its head tilted slightly, and it did not move as they approached. It sat there like a marker, like something that had been waiting for them to catch up. Edwin let out a breath. "See? It's waiting. It's resting," Johnny said, but his voice was quieter now, less certain. Derek walked toward the hummock. The wolf watched him come, and for a moment he was sure it would run, that he would get close, and it would vanish into the trees the way it had on the shore. But it did not move. It sat there, its yellow eyes steady, and when Derek was 10 feet away it stood up, turned, and walked into the trees, following a narrow path that led east. Derek looked at the path, then at the water, then at the sky. The sun was low, the light already fading. They would not make the road today. They would be in the forest when dark came. "We follow it," he said. Johnny stared at him. "You're serious?" "It knows where the high ground is. It's been out here longer than us." Derek looked at the path, the faint trace of paw prints in the mud. "We follow it until we find dry ground. Then we figure out the rest." He started walking. Behind him, after a long moment, he heard Edwin follow, and then Johnny, cursing under his breath but following all the same. The wolf was ahead of them, a shadow in the trees, and Derek followed it because there was nothing else to follow, because the shore was gone and the road was lost, and the wolf was moving east, toward the village, toward home, or maybe just toward the next patch of dry ground. Either way, it was moving, and that was more than they had. The path wound through the flooded trees, always on the highest ground, always avoiding the deepest water. Derek lost track of time, lost track of distance. There was only the next step, the next tree, the wolf's tail disappearing around the next bend. His legs were numb, his hands were numb. His mind was starting to drift into a place where nothing mattered except putting one foot in front of the other. The wolf stopped. Derek almost walked into it before he saw it standing there, its head turned, its ears up. He stopped, his heart suddenly loud in his ears. The wolf looked at him, looked past him, looked at Edwin and Johnny behind him, and then it stepped off the path and disappeared into the brush. Derek stood there, alone, the forest quiet around him. Then he saw it, a break in the trees, a space where the light was different, where the ground rose up into a ridge of dry earth and fallen logs. A place to stop, a place to rest. He walked toward it, and the wolf was there, already lying down on the highest point of the ridge, its head on its paws, its eyes half closed. It had led them to shelter, and now it was waiting again, waiting for whatever came next. The ridge was not much, a spine of earth maybe 30 feet long, humped with moss and littered with fallen branches. But it was dry, or dry enough, and that was more than anything else for miles. Derek dropped to his knees and felt the ground with his hands, the damp moss, the hard earth beneath, and for a moment he wanted to lie down and not get up again. The cold was in his chest now, a tightness that made every breath a thing he had to think about. Edwin was already gathering branches, pulling them into a pile near the largest fallen log. His hands shook so badly he dropped half of what he picked up, but he kept going, his face blank with exhaustion. Johnny stood at the edge of the ridge, looking back the way they had come, his arms wrapped around himself. He had not spoken since they entered the trees. The wolf lay on the highest point of the ridge, a small hummock where a tree had fallen and left a hollow of packed earth. Its head was on its paws, its eyes half closed, but its ears moved with every sound. It had claimed the best spot, the driest spot, and Derek found that he did not mind. The wolf had found the ridge. It had led them here. If it wanted the high ground, that seemed fair. "We need a fire," Edwin said. His voice was a whisper, as if speaking too loud might break something. "I can't feel my fingers." Derek looked at the branches Edwin had gathered. They were wet, dripping with the water of the flood, but some of the inner wood might be dry. He had matches in his pocket, in a tin box he had used for 100 fires. He did not know if they were still dry. He did not know anything anymore. He pulled out the tin, opened it. The matches were there, 3 of them, the tips dark with moisture. He took one out, found a dry spot under the fallen log, and struck. The match flared, sputtered, went out. He tried again. The same. The third match he held longer, let it burn into his fingers before he touched it to the moss. And for a moment there was a thread of smoke, a whisper of heat, and then nothing. No fire, he said. Edwin sat down hard, his back against the log. He stared at the pile of wet branches, his face empty. We're going to freeze. We won't freeze, Derek said. He did not know if that was true. The cold was already in him, deep, and the night would be worse. But they had survived the island, they had survived the crossing, and they would survive this. They had to. Johnny came back from the edge of the ridge. His face was gray, his lips pressed together. He sat down against the log next to Edwin, his shoulder touching the younger man's, and for a moment he was quiet. Then he looked at the wolf. It's not cold, he said. Look at it. It's fine. The wolf had its nose tucked under its tail, its body curled into a tight ball. Its fur was matted with water, its ribs showing, but it was not shivering. Not like them. It's got a coat, Edwin said. It's made for this. It's got something, Johnny said. There was no anger in his voice now, just a tired wonder. It knew where to go. It found this place. How did it find this place? Derek did not answer. He was watching the wolf, the slow rise and fall of its side, the way its ears twitched even in sleep. He thought about the old men in the village, the things they said about animals and the forest. They know because they have to know, one of them had said once. A man can be wrong and still eat tomorrow. A wolf is wrong once, and it's over. The wolf had been right so far. Right about the water, right about the path, right about the ridge. Derek did not know if that was instinct or luck or something else. He only knew that they were alive because of it, and that was a thing he did not know what to do with. The light was fading fast, the shadows under the trees turning black. The forest was quiet, the only sound the drip of water from the branches and the small sounds of the men breathing. Derek pressed himself against the log, felt Edwin on one side, Johnny on the other, and the cold was a thing that wrapped around them all. He thought about trust. He had trusted the river, and it had taken their boat. He had trusted his own judgment, and it had kept them on the island too long. He had trusted the wolf, and it had brought them here. Trust was not a thing he knew how to do anymore. But here, in the dark, with the cold eating into his bones, he found that he did not have a choice. They were on the wolf's ridge, in the wolf's forest, and the wolf was lying 10 feet away, its eyes open now, watching them with a patience that was older than fear. Edwin spoke, his voice so low that Derek almost did not hear it. My grandmother said wolves choose their packs. They don't just take anyone. They choose. Johnny let out a breath that might have been a laugh. We're not a pack. We're 3 fools who lost their boat. It chose us, Edwin said. It could have left. It didn't. Derek looked at the wolf. Its eyes caught the last light, 2 points of yellow in the gloom. It was watching them, and there was something in its gaze that he could not name. Not threat, not fear. Something else. Something that made the hair on his arms stand up even in the cold. So what now? Johnny asked. His voice was small, stripped of its anger. We follow it. We become its pack. The wolf blinked, slow, and then it put its head back down on its paws. It did not move again, but its eyes stayed open, watching, waiting. Derek leaned back against the log and closed his eyes. He did not have an answer. He did not know what they were, or what they were becoming. But the wolf was there, and they were there, and the night was coming down around them. That was enough for now. Dawn came pale and cold, a gray light that seeped through the trees like water through cloth. Derek had not slept. He had sat against the log with his eyes closed, listening to the forest, listening to the small sounds of Edwin's breathing and Johnny's restless turning, listening for the wolf. But the wolf had made no sound all night. When Derek opened his eyes, it was still there, curled on its hummock, its fur silver in the thin light. He tried to move and found that his body had turned to stone. His legs were stiff, his hands swollen, his back a single knot of pain. The cold had done something to him, something that went deeper than the skin. He pushed himself up anyway, his joints cracking, and stood on legs that did not want to hold him. Edwin was already awake, sitting with his back to the log, his arms wrapped around his knees. He looked smaller than he had yesterday, his face hollow, his eyes too large. He did not look at Derek. He was watching the wolf. "It didn't move all night," Edwin said. His voice was dry, cracked. "I watched it." "It's resting," Derek said. "Same as us." "It's not resting. It's waiting." Edwin's hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "It's waiting for us to get up, to move." Johnny stirred beside them, a groan that turned into a cough. He sat up slowly, his face gray, his lips cracked. He looked at the wolf, then at Derek, then at the empty space where the fire should have been. "We need to eat." They had nothing. The fish was gone, eaten on the island. The blanket was lost somewhere in the crossing, dropped or forgotten. They had the clothes on their backs, the matches in Derek's pocket, and nothing else. The hunger was there now, not just an absence but a presence, a thing that sat in the stomach and gnawed. Derek looked at the forest. The water had dropped overnight, leaving the ground wet but solid in most places. The trees were bare, the underbrush stripped by the flood. There was nothing to eat, nothing to gather. The village was still miles away, and they had no strength to walk. "We find the road today," he said. "We follow the ridge east. The logging road cuts through somewhere ahead." "If it's still there," Johnny said. "If the flood didn't take it." "It's there." Derek did not know if it was true, but he said it anyway. Saying it made it real, or made it real enough to walk toward. He looked at the wolf. It had lifted its head now, its ears forward, its eyes on them. It was not lying down anymore. It was crouched, its weight on its front paws, its tail still. It looked like it was listening to something, something beyond the ridge, beyond the trees. Then it stood. It stretched, its front legs extended, its back arched, and then it walked to the edge of the ridge and stopped. It looked back at them, one quick glance, and then it stepped off the ridge and disappeared into the trees. Edwin made a sound, something between a gasp and a cry. "It's leaving." "Let it," Johnny said, but his voice was hollow. Derek watched the place where the wolf had vanished. The trees were still, the light unchanged. The wolf was gone, and suddenly the ridge felt empty, too open, too exposed. They had been with the wolf for a day, a night, and now it was gone, and Derek did not know if that was good or bad. He only knew that something was missing. They gathered themselves, slowly, each movement an effort. Derek led the way east along the ridge, picking a path through the wet ground, trying to keep the sun on his right. Edwin followed, silent, his head down. Johnny brought up the rear, and Derek could hear him stumbling, cursing under his breath. They walked for an hour, maybe more. The ridge began to fade, the ground turning soft again, and Derek was starting to think they would have to wait again when Edwin stopped. "Wait," Edwin said. His voice was strange, not tired but something else. "Listen." Derek stopped. The forest was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no wind, just the drip of water and the sound of their own breathing. And then, from somewhere ahead, a sound. A branch snapping, a rustle of leaves. Derek's hand went up, a signal to stop, to be still. They stood there, 3 men in the wet woods, listening. The wolf stepped out from behind a tree. It was carrying something in its jaws, something dark and heavy. It moved slowly, its head low, its legs stiff. It walked toward them, 10 feet, 5, and then it stopped and dropped the thing on the ground. A hare, its fur wet, its body still warm. The wolf backed away, 3 steps, 4, and sat down. Its tongue hung out, its sides heaving. It had run, hunted, killed, and now it sat there, watching them, waiting. Edwin let out a breath. "It brought us food." Johnny stared at the hare, then at the wolf. "It's not ours. It's the wolf's." "It dropped it right in front of us," Edwin said. It wants us to have it. It doesn't want anything. It's an animal. Derek looked at the hare. It was fresh, killed minutes ago, its blood still bright on the fur. The wolf had hunted, had run down the hare, had killed it, and then it had brought it here. To them. He did not know why. He did not know if there was a why. But the hare was there, and they were starving, and the wolf was watching. He walked to the hare and picked it up. It was heavy, warm, the fur soft under his fingers. He turned to the others. We eat. Johnny's face twisted. That's not ours. We didn't kill it. It's food, Derek said. We need food. There's no other food. We take this, we're pack. We're not men anymore. We're animals. Derek looked at the wolf. It had not moved. It sat on its haunches, its ears up, its eyes on the hare. It had given them the kill, and now it was waiting to see what they would do. He thought about the old men in the village, the things they said about the forest. The wolf is your reflection, they said. When you see it, you see what you are. He knelt down, pulled his knife from his belt, and began to skin the hare. His hands were clumsy, the cold still in them, but the knife was sharp and the hair was fresh. He worked quickly, the skin peeling away, the smell of blood rising in the cold air. Edwin came to help, his hands steady now, taking the meat as Derek cut it. Johnny stood apart, watching, his arms crossed, his face hard. But when Derek held out a piece of raw meat, red and glistening, Johnny took it. They ate in silence. The meat was tough, gamey, but it was food, and they chewed it slowly, making it last. Derek saved the heart, the liver, put them on a flat stone near the wolf. The wolf looked at the stone, looked at Derek, and then it came forward, slow, its body low, and took the liver in its jaws. It backed away to eat, its eyes never leaving them. Derek sat back, the hunger quiet for now, and watched the wolf eat. They had taken its kill, and it had taken their offering, and somewhere in that exchange something had changed. He did not know what it was, or what it meant, but he knew they were not the same men who had woken on the ridge that morning. The wolf finished the liver and lay down, its head on its paws, its eyes half closed. It was not watching them anymore. It was resting, full for the first time in days, and Derek realized that it trusted them now. Or maybe it had always trusted them. He did not know. He looked at Johnny, at Edwin, at the meat still in their hands. We move when we're done. The road is east. We find it today. Johnny did not answer. He was looking at the wolf, and there was something in his face that Derek had not seen before. Not anger, not fear. Something softer. Something that looked like wonder. The meat sat heavy in their stomachs, a warmth that spread slowly through the cold hollows of their bodies. Derek finished the last piece of hair and wiped his hands on his pants, feeling the grease on his fingers, the blood dried under his nails. He had not eaten raw meat since he was a boy, when his grandfather had given him a piece of liver still warm from a deer and told him that this was how men had eaten for 10,000 years. Now he understood what the old man had meant. There was something in it that cooked meat did not have. Something that made you feel like you were part of the thing you had eaten. The wolf had finished its share and was lying on the edge of the clearing, its head up, its ears moving. It looked stronger now, the hollows in its sides less deep, its eyes brighter. It had eaten well, and it was watching them with the same patience it had shown all morning, waiting for them to decide what came next. Edwin stood up, his movements slower than before, but steadier. We should go. The wolf is ready. The wolf is always ready, Johnny said. He had not moved from his spot against the tree. His hands were folded in his lap, his face turned toward the ground. It doesn't have to think about where it's going. It just goes. That's why we follow it, Edwin said. It knows where the ground is dry. It knows where the food is. It knows where the forest is, Johnny said. He looked up, and Derek saw something in his face that had not been there before. Not anger. Something harder. It's taking us deeper. We've been walking east, or what we thought was east, but look at the sun. We've been going north. away from the village. Derek looked at the sky. The sun was a pale disk behind the clouds. Hard to read, but Johnny was right. They had been following the ridge, and the ridge had curved. The village was east, but they had been walking northeast, deeper into the forest, following the wolf's path. "It's taking us to higher ground," Derek said. "The floodplain goes for miles. We have to go around it." "Or through it," Johnny said. "The road is through it. The road is east. We knew that yesterday. We knew it this morning. Now we're following a wolf into the deep woods because it gave us a rabbit." "It gave us food," Edwin said. "We would have starved. We would have found the road. We would have walked until we found it. We were walking in circles. You know we were." Johnny stood up, his fists clenched. "I know that we're 3 men, not 3 wolves. I know that my father fished this river for 40 years and never once followed an animal to find his way home. I know that if we keep going north, we'll be in the mountains by nightfall. And then what? We follow it to its den? We live on rabbits until spring." Edwin took a step back, his face pale. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I see the way you look at it. Like it's going to save us. Like it's some kind of spirit." Johnny's voice was rising, the anger he had held in for 2 days finally breaking loose. "It's a wolf. It's a hungry, scared animal that found us and decided we were easier than hunting. That's all. It doesn't care if we live or die. It cares if we have food." Derek stood between them before he knew what he was doing. "Enough." Johnny turned on him. "You too. You're thinking about it. I can see it in your face. You're thinking maybe the old stories are true. Maybe the wolf knows something we don't. But it doesn't. It knows where the water isn't. That's all. It doesn't know the village. It doesn't know the road. It knows the forest, and it's taking us deeper into the forest, and if we follow it much longer, we won't find our way back." Derek looked at the wolf. It had stood up at the sound of Johnny's voice, its ears flat, its body tense. It was watching them, ready to run, ready to fight, waiting to see what the men would do. It did not understand their words, but it understood the anger. It understood that the pack was breaking. Derek thought about the old men in the village, the ones who had lived in the taiga their whole lives. They had told him about the rules of the forest, the things that kept you alive. Trust your feet, not your fear. Trust what you know, not what you hope. A wolf is not a guide. A wolf is a wolf, but they had followed it across the river. They had followed it to the ridge. They had eaten its kill. Those things were true too. Edwin spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "I'm going with it." Johnny stared at him. "What?" "I'm following the wolf. I don't care if it's north or east or anywhere. It's alive. It knows how to stay alive. I don't. I almost drowned yesterday. I almost froze last night. I'm not going to die today because we walked the wrong way and couldn't admit we were wrong." "You're a fool," Johnny said. "You're going to die in the woods and no one will ever find you." "Maybe," Edwin said, "but if I stay here, I die anyway." He looked at Derek, and there was something in his eyes that Derek recognized. Not fear, not desperation. Certainty. Edwin had made his choice, and he was not going to change it. Johnny turned to Derek. "Talk to him. Make him see." Derek looked at the wolf, then at Edwin, then at Johnny. He thought about the river, the island, the long night and the cold. He thought about the hair, still warm, dropped at their feet. He thought about the old men, the wolf as a reflection, the thing you see when no one is watching. "I'm going east," he said. "To the road. To the village." Johnny let out a breath. "Good. Edwin can make his own choice." Johnny's face went white. "You're letting him go." "I'm not letting him do anything. He's a man. He chooses." Edwin nodded, once, and walked toward the wolf. The wolf watched him come, its body tense, and for a moment Derek thought it would run. But it did not. It stood there, waiting, and when Edwin was 10 feet away it turned and walked into the trees. Edwin followed. Johnny stood frozen, his hands shaking. "You're going to let him die." "He's not going to die," Derek said. He did not know if it was true, but he said it anyway. He's going to live. The way he knows how. He turned east, toward the sun, toward the road, toward the village. He did not look back at the trees where Edwin had disappeared. He did not look at Johnny. He started walking, one foot in front of the other, and after a long moment, he heard Johnny fall in behind him. They walked in silence. The forest was quiet, the light thin. Derek did not know if he had made the right choice. He did not know if Edwin would live or die, if the wolf would lead him to safety or into the deep woods where no one would ever find him. He did not know anything anymore. But he was walking east. He was walking toward the road. He was walking like a man, not a wolf, and that was the only thing he knew for certain. Derek walked east. The sun was a pale disk behind the clouds, impossible to track, so he used the water. The flooded forest drained slowly, the standing water finding its way back to the river, and the flow told him which way was down, which way was east. He kept the current on his right and walked. Johnny followed 10 paces behind, silent. He had not spoken since they left Edwin, and Derek did not try to make him. There was nothing to say. They had made their choices, and now they would live with them or die with them, and talking would not change either. The ground was soft, sucking at their boots, and every step took more strength than Derek had. The hare meat was gone, burned up by the morning's walking, and the hunger was back, worse than before. It was not just an ache now. It was a thing with teeth, a thing that gnawed at his stomach and whispered to him that he should stop, should lie down, should let the forest take him. He kept walking. The sun moved, or seemed to move, and the shadows shifted, and Derek tried to remember the shape of the river from the village, the way the land rose and fell, the places where the logging road cut through. His father had worked the timber crews when Derek was a boy, and he had ridden in the trucks, had seen the road from the river to the village 100 times. But that was 30 years ago, and the forest had grown, and the flood had changed everything, and he did not know if he was walking toward home or away from it. Johnny fell. Derek heard the splash, the curse, and turned to see him on his hands and knees in a pool of brown water, his face white, his lips moving. He was saying something, a prayer maybe, or just words, and Derek went back and pulled him up. "Keep moving," Derek said. "I can't." Johnny's voice was a whisper. "I can't feel my feet." "Keep moving anyway." He pulled Johnny forward, one arm around his waist, and they walked together, slow, clumsy, their breath coming in clouds. The forest was quiet, the only sound the splash of their boots and the rasp of their breathing. Derek's legs were shaking, his arms weak, but he held Johnny up because there was no one else to do it. They walked like that for an hour, maybe 2. Derek lost track. The sun was lower now, the light turning gold, and he knew that if they did not find the road soon, they would not find it at all. They would spend another night in the cold, and they would not wake up. He stopped. There was something ahead, a break in the trees, a line of pale light that was not the sky. He squinted, blinked, tried to see. His eyes were watering, his head pounding, but the line was there, straight, flat, cutting through the forest like a scar. The road. He let go of Johnny and stumbled forward, his feet catching on roots, his hands reaching out. The trees opened, and there it was. The logging road, muddy and rutted, its surface churned by water, but solid, dry in places, a thing made by men. He fell to his knees on the road and lay there, his face in the mud, and for a long time he did not move. Johnny came up behind him, slow, and stood over him. "It's here." Derek pushed himself up. The road stretched east and west, disappearing into the trees. East was the village. East was home. He started walking, and Johnny followed. The road was easier than the forest, harder than the river. The mud was thick, the ruts deep, but it was a path, a thing that went somewhere, and Derek followed it because there was nothing else to follow. His legs were numb, his hands numb. his mind a gray fog that held only one thought: east, east, east. He did not know how long he walked. The sun went down, the light faded, and still he walked. Johnny was behind him, silent, and Derek did not look back to see if he was still there. He did not want to know. The road curved, and Derek saw something ahead. A light. Small, yellow, moving. He thought it was the sun, but the sun was gone, and the light was too low, too close. He stopped, squinted, tried to see. The light was a lantern, swinging, and behind it was a shape, a man, and behind the man was a boat. Derek tried to call out, but his throat was dry, his voice gone. He raised his hand, waved, a small movement that cost him everything. The lantern stopped, swung toward him, and a voice called out, sharp and startled. There, by the road. Derek fell. He did not feel the ground, did not feel the cold. He lay there, his face in the mud, and heard footsteps, voices, hands on his shoulders, turning him over. A face above him, young, scared, a boy from the village, maybe the son of someone he knew. It's Derek. It's Derek from the fishing camp. Get the blanket. Get the vodka. Derek tried to speak, tried to tell them about Edwin, about the wolf, about the island. But his mouth would not work, and his eyes were closing, and the lantern light was the only thing in the world, a small yellow flame that flickered and faded and went out. Derek woke to the smell of bread. It was a smell he had known his whole life, the smell of the village bakery, of yeast and wood smoke and something sweet that he had never been able to name. For a long time he lay still, his eyes closed, and let the smell fill him. Then he opened his eyes and saw the ceiling of his own cabin, the familiar crack in the beam, the hook where his father had hung his coat 40 years ago. He was home. The next days were a blur of blankets and broth, of hands checking his pulse, of faces looking down at him with worry. The village women came with soup, with bread, with tea so strong it made his teeth ache. The men came too, standing in the doorway, asking questions he did not know how to answer. Where was the boat? How had he crossed the river? What had happened to the others? He told them what he could: the flood, the island, the wolf. He told them about the crossing, the ridge, the hare. He told them about the split, about Edwin following the wolf into the trees, about walking east until he found the road. He did not tell them about the hunger, the cold, the voice in his head that had told him to lie down and let the forest take him. Some things were not for telling. Johnny came back 2 days later. He had been found by the same search party, wandering the logging road a mile from where Derek had collapsed. He was thinner, quieter, his face hollowed out by something that was not just hunger. He sat by Derek's bed for an hour without speaking, and then he said, "I should not have let him go." Derek did not answer. There was nothing to say. Johnny had made his choice, and Derek had made his, and Edwin had made his. The choices were made, and they could not be unmade. They searched for Edwin. The men of the village went out in boats, on foot, along the river and through the forest. They searched for 3 days, and on the 4th day they found him. He was walking down the logging road from the north, alone, his clothes torn, his face thin, but alive. He had a cut on his forehead and frostbite on 2 of his fingers, but he was alive. He told them about the wolf, how it had led him through the flooded forest, how it had found high ground and dry ground, how it had hunted again, a squirrel this time, and shared the meat with him. How they had walked together for 2 days, the wolf always ahead, always waiting, always watching. How on the 3rd morning the wolf had stopped at the edge of a clearing and looked back at him, and then it had turned and walked into the trees and not come back. "It knew I was safe," Edwin said. "It knew the road was close. It left me there." The village listened, and some of them nodded, and some of them crossed themselves, and some of them said nothing at all. Derek listened from his bed, and he thought about the old men, the things they had told him when he was young. "The wolf is your reflection," they had said. "When you see it, you see what you are when no one is watching." He did not know what the wolf had seen when it looked at them. He did not know what it had seen in Edwin, or in Johnny, or in himself. But he knew that they were alive, all three of them, and that the wolf was alive somewhere in the forest, and that something had passed between them that he did not have words for. Weeks passed. The flood receded, the river returned to its banks, and the village went back to its rhythms. Derek healed, slowly, his strength coming back in pieces. He went to the river sometimes, to the place where the sandbar had been, and looked at the water. The island was gone, washed away by the flood, and the willow was gone with it. There was nothing left to show that they had ever been there. One evening he was sitting on the bank, watching the sun go down, when he saw something on the far shore. A shape, low and gray, moving through the trees. He watched it for a long time, not moving, not breathing. The shape stopped at the water's edge, and for a moment he saw it clearly. A wolf, young, thin, its fur silver in the fading light. It stood there, looking across the river, and Derek thought he saw its eyes meet his, but it was too far to tell. Johnny came up behind him, silent, and stood beside him. Is it the same one? I don't know. Do you want it to be? Derek did not answer. The wolf stood on the shore for a long moment, and then it turned and disappeared into the trees. The river flowed between them, gray and cold, and the sun went down, and the world was quiet. Johnny sat down beside him, his hands in his pockets. Edwin is leaving. He's going to the city. Says he wants to study, learn to be a vet, maybe, work with animals. Derek nodded. That's good. He asked about you. Said to tell you he's sorry. For what? For following the wolf. For leaving us. Derek looked at the river, at the place where the island had been, at the dark line of trees on the far shore. He doesn't have anything to be sorry for. He did what he had to do. We all did, Johnny said. That's the problem. They sat in silence, two men on the bank of a river, and the night came down around them. Derek thought about the island, the fire, the wolf's eyes watching from the dark. He thought about the crossing, the cold water, the hair dropped at their feet. He thought about the road, the lantern, the hands that had pulled him from the mud. He thought about the old men, the stories they told. The wolf is your reflection, they had said. When you see it, you see what you are. He did not know what he was. He did not know if he was a man or something else, something that had crossed a river with a wolf and come back changed. But he knew that the wolf was out there, somewhere, and that the river was still flowing, and that the world was still turning, and that was enough. He stood up, brushed the dirt from his pants, and walked back toward the village. Johnny followed, and they did not speak, and the river ran behind them, dark and cold and full of things they would never tell anyone.